All right, thank you all. For the sake of time, we'll let the other crew join us in a minute, but I want to get started. Again, this is Rachel Kloffenstein. I'm turned my video off because I'm having some internet quality issues, so I hope that you all can hear me right now. Brandon, let me know if there are any other issues. On the slide right now, you can see we have the, what we're trying to cover with the report out. But I first just want to say, truly incredible job. I was able to sneak into all of the breakout sessions multiple times throughout the full working session. And I've been super impressed. There were really amazing conversations and a ton of work that had been going into each of their breakout sessions, each with a little bit of a kind of a different style, but it was really great to see. I'm sorry that you all didn't get to go into each of them too, but yeah, really, really impressed, and we really appreciate your time. So what we're gonna do now, scheduled until about 1:45, we've asked that facilitators from each of the breakout sessions summarize and kind of report out on the following things. First, just like the number of questions eliminated or where their list is currently at. Any general comments or edits and like big changes, what worked well, what didn't. And the ideal target number of management questions agreed upon by the group. Again, this was something we hoped that could be discussed. And then, if applicable, whether all the questions were actually discussed. Some groups maybe didn't get to all of them. And I'm seeing there's a chat question real quick. Okay. So yeah, just hoping to have this all covered. There's 5 minutes per theme, and I'm going to be taking notes. And what I'm actually going to do is, in a minute, I'm just going to switch my screen over to a Word document, and I will be jotting down the notes, but I'm also going to be following up with all the facilitators and note takers to get the detailed outcomes of each of these sessions. And we're going to run through these in the order of the number of questions per session, starting with the lowest. So that'll be the group that had the fewest questions. First, Delta as an evolving place, then water supply, and then flood use, flood risk and land use. And then after all that, we'll have a discussion. So without further ado, Chelsea, I'm going to let you speak, and I'm going to swap right now to have this Word document up.
Thanks, Rachel. Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. So I was the moderator for the Delta as an Evolving Place breakout session with Corey Copeland also moderating and taking some notes, including the two of us. There were 12 people in our session, and everybody was just fantastic, really interested, engaged, enthusiastic. We had a very good and constructive conversation. I guess I'll run through your kind of your 4 banner points, Rachel. Number of management questions eliminated. We started with 60, and we fully eliminated 7 of them. And then we also made note that 2 of them are, important questions, but probably not on this round of the science action agenda. So, effectively for this particular process, not really in the running anymore. And then we had 8 questions that we did a rating exercise, and those questions were rated as kind of lower priority, but we didn't discuss those in depth. Excuse me. General comments and challenges. I think that a challenge that emerged for us early on was realizing that there's just a really pronounced lack of understanding of the social system in the Delta. And so there was kind of some talk about the need for a more phased approach where, we need this baseline understanding, and then we can move on to understand or to do research on more specific and topical areas that are relevant to specific management questions. And so a lot of our conversation was sort of moving around and trying to figure out what that baseline understanding entails, and then kind of piecing together different, more specific branches of research that might then complement that baseline understanding of the social system. Another challenge that I expect was widely shared among groups was just there's a lot of content, a lot of depth to these questions, and very happily everybody had opinions, and so it just took time to talk about each of them. But I wouldn't say that was necessarily any sort of drawback. It was a time-consuming process. The ideal number of management questions, we did discuss this near the beginning of the session, and we agreed that although we had the lowest number of questions submitted at 60 of all the themes, that doesn't necessarily mean that Delta's place should be underrepresented or less represented in the final set of questions, because there are so many unknowns and important research gaps. And so I think that our general consensus was that something toward the higher end of the range, the 5 to 10 or even more range, would be appropriate for this theme. And I'll tell you that our conversation, once we started to dig into the questions more specifically, the direction we ended up taking was to articulate some kind of overarching categories of questions, and I'll read those to you in just a second. But basically, what we're saying is that these are, in broad strokes, what the questions are about, and then we worked on situating the questions that have been submitted within those topics, and we came up with 11 of those kind of big picture tags. So I would say that our final number would be somewhere in the like 10 to 12 range is what we would suggest. On that note, I will read you these topical areas. So again, these are kind of very broadly stated what we think the questions, the Delta is Place questions, should be about. So we have the first one is something related to public participation, co-planning, and co-design, also related to environmental justice. The next one is about traditional ecological knowledge and how to best incorporate traditional ecological knowledge into management processes, and in what ways traditional ecological knowledge is most relevant to management. The third category is kind of establishing this baseline understanding of who are the human communities in the Delta, what are their values, what place meanings do they hold. Fourth is a question about structuring this whole business of integrating social science into the Delta. We need a way to kind of lay the foundation for this work of starting to have a more robust human dimensions program, and then from there more specific questions can be developed and pursued. Next topic is about adaptation, and then related but distinct is a topic about risk and resiliency. Both of those are kind of in the context of climate and also other large-scale environmental changes. Next category is about trust, so social trust in management decision-making. The next one about economic development. Then multi-benefit projects, so how to weigh different factors when we're making management decisions. And then finally, agriculture and other rural communities as a standalone category. So I will leave that there. That was the gist of our conversation.
Awesome, thank you. Sorry, I just missed these last couple of ones, but I will look at
you got economic, multi-benefit projects, and then agriculture and rural communities.
All right, thank you. And then I also just have a reminder for those that are on the phone to make sure to mute yourselves, please. All right, so thank you, Chelsea. I will add that last one, but then we're going to swap to the next group, which is water supply. So I think, Anthony, you want to take it away?
Rachel, I'm going to request that somebody take my place, and I'll go after them as I'm still trying to gather our thoughts from our conversation.
Sounds great.
Sorry.
No worries. Aaron, are you guys ready with flood risk and land use?
Hello? I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I was muted. Yeah, I know, I'm like still trying to gather my thoughts too, and I wasn't expecting Anthony to punt on me like that. I thought I had a little bit more time. We weren't able to get to all of for one, all of the questions that were assigned to us, and then we weren't able to get to some of the specific questions, some of the ancillary specific questions either. I had a small group, which made it great because it was pretty easy to manage. And there was only 4 of us there, aside from Annie and I, who was my note taker. And yeah, I just want to give kudos to the people that participated in this. We had a lot of really interesting conversation. I believe that we started out with 90 questions. I believe that we eliminated approximately 60 of those questions. Towards the end, we just got to like kind of like a slash and burn place where it was like, okay, thumbs up, thumbs down. Do we keep this? Do we let it go? But there was a lot of good conversation about how to refine things and make the questions more relevant. So let's see, number 60, we eliminated 60. I would say some of the key challenges with refining them, it was a lot. It was a big volume of questions. I don't know that we didn't even attempt to address which ones were the most important or what were the, we didn't get to what was the appropriate number of questions or any of that, because we spent most of them in discussing the actual questions themselves. It was such a good discussion. I think in the future, if we were going to do it again, I would recommend that, we maybe have like 2 breakout sessions, or, maybe revisit this over 2 days, because I think towards the end we were just kind of like, wow, just a little bit, a little brain dead from like really digging into all of the questions. So I don't really know what else to say. I mean, I just really want to, like I said, thank the people that participated. And we hopefully highlighted some important questions that we say, yeah, these are really the important ones, and we really want to keep this. So I think that we were able to sort through quite a bit of the data, but we didn't get to all of it. I think that's all I have to say.
No, that's great. Thank you, Erin. All right, Anthony, do you still need a little bit more time?
Nah, let me wing it.
All right, I trust you.
Well, I just want to start off by saying I probably have the pleasure of having the most well-informed, intelligent, and well-communicated group. I was really pleased by the flow of the discussions and the ability for everyone to really kind of roll up their sleeves and get into the work. And we did a lot of comprehensive combining of questions and reprioritizing them. So I had a group of about 10. We had about 71 questions over 5 categories. And we felt that 5 categories weren't enough. So we broke out 9 questions into a 6th category for water management modeling. And so,
did you just say you ended up with 9?
We had 5 subcategories, and we added a new one, and removed 9 questions into that category that were regarding water management modeling. I mean, as folks know, a lot of this is not easy to compartmentalize or to silo, because so many of the questions kind of go across different sub-themes or categories. So yeah, we just had another category. So with that said, water supply, excuse me, look at that here, I lost for a second. Bear with me. I gotta zoom out of my mural. Okay, water operations had a ton. It had the majority of the questions, about 31 of them, which we came up with about 4 or 5 priorities in that group. where we really were looking at combining how we look at water operations and modeling for short-term events to address the big gulp aspect of water supply, and then looking at long-term effects or modeling to look at the little sip decisions. Anyway, sorry, I'm still formulating some of the thoughts in my mind here, but that one was a big one. We were looking at prioritizing what are the effects of drought-induced changes in flow and other physical parameters in the Delta. That was a big one. And then as well as we combined another one into what are the indirect ecological effects of water export and project-driven water movements, temperatures, and reservoir practices, and which management actions would optimize water supply needs and species management or impacts, particularly those that influence salmonid survival and behavior in the South Delta. So just in general, I think for water supply, because it is so broad a topic, so we were talking not only in Delta use, but also reservoir operations and releases and how that affects in Delta, and then the effects of water supply south of the Delta for water users and how their use of Delta exported water affects the Delta as well. So we had a gamut of discussion. So yeah, I think we're going to land on about 10 priorities from the 6 different categories, 10 to 12, I think. And I did offer the ability to submit a track change Word document to the group, as we felt like we needed probably a little bit more time to continue refining our work. But I think we did make good progress.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Anthony.
Sure.
And
Thank
to
you.
all in water supply. Next up, we have the invasive species, non-native species crew. Dylan, Chapel, are you guys at a place where you can report out?
Yes, we are. Thanks, Rachel, and thanks everybody for the updates on your respective sections. I think our group is probably the only one that came out of this with a band name, thanks to Gina Darren. So we are Dylan and the New Invaders. Really, really critical that this be incorporated in the science action agenda. So we had fun, and just to echo what everyone else has said also. Just really great participation from the group, really thoughtful, nuanced thinking around this. So big thanks to everyone. So we had 114 questions spread out across what started as 5 sections, and for our ranking purposes, we combined into, started as 6 different sub-themes. We combined into 5 to work on. And I guess some of the overarching things that we discussed at the beginning was, first of all, just that there are multiple different kinds of invasive species in the Delta. And so for different questions, it was really important for us to be as clear as possible about whether we were referring to plants, whether we were referring to, predatory fish, or whether we were referring more broadly to just invasion in the system across different taxa. And we updated the wording of the different priority questions appropriately as well. Another theme that came up was that we elected to strike any questions that were yes or no. So a lot of the questions that we started with from the initial scoping were more like, is this happening? Or, can we say this? Or like, can we do this? So anything that was worded that way, we decided to reword to be a little more management friendly and focus a little more on the action that the original wording of the question was sort of getting at. So from our 114 questions, we ended up squeezing it down to 11. So and our sub-themes here were predation. So we had two questions focused on predation on native fishes specifically. That was another distinction that we felt was really important to update some of the wording to reflect. We had 2 questions about population control. And one of those is specifically focused on invasive aquatic vegetation. And the other is a little more broadly focused on invasive species population levels and at what level, basically what level of invasive species population maintenance will still allow for desired management outcomes. We had a couple questions about coordination and decision making, one of which has a lot of overlap with our sort of Delta's place human dimensions, and there's a lot of social science and human aspects that go into invasive species control on a variety of levels. So we had one question related to that, and then as far as coordination, one thing that really floated to the top as important for the group was early detection and rapid response, and improving some of our coordination around early detection and rapid response in the Delta system. Our 4th category was monitoring, prevention, and introduction of invasive species. And so one of our questions looked at vectors of introduction that might not be fully identified yet. The other involved coordinated monitoring programs to better address the spread of invasive species. And the last involved predictive models that would allow us to look at where invasive species are likely to spread and what control methods are likely to be effective. Lastly, we had a section that was, when it came to us, was referred to as life history. We felt like that title actually might be good to update. We felt like a lot of the questions in that section weren't necessarily life history focused per se. So that was one note. And one of the major questions that came out of that was this question of how biogeochemical factors, including nutrients, microbes, and organic carbon, influence invasive communities generally in the Delta. And then the second question that was part of this was around the impact of invasive species on tidal marsh ecosystem function and, by extension, tidal marsh restoration. So we were able, we sort of set our mural up in a tiered system that was based on the weighted averages. And so for every question, we started with 5 main questions, and then the group took time to review those, but also to go through the rest of the questions. And so anything that we felt like was maybe not accurately ranked in the online survey, we brought up and discussed as a group, and oftentimes combined into a different, another question. So that's kind of how we ended up with many of our questions, was by synthesizing pieces of different questions to sketch out the narrative. So thanks a lot.
Thank you, Dylan, and all of the invasive species crew. You guys did seem to be having a lot of fun, and well done on getting down to 11 questions. All right, next up, native species 2. I think that'll be Pascal.
Sure. Hi. I would also like to thank the participants of Native Species 2 for staying engaged for the full 3 hours and 115 questions. We had a big task ahead of us. And we didn't delete anything, actually. We decided that a lot of these were important questions and ongoing research topics. We did do a lot of prioritization, though, and combining of questions, particularly questions that were broad and overarching, and then those sub-questions that related to the specific management actions or paired with an underlying plan. And one suggestion was to look more at each of these management questions and which plans they may be related to, or the management actions they may be related to. One of the key challenges that we noticed was there was a lack of terrestrial questions. A lot of the questions in this theme focused on aquatic species and particularly migratory and listed species, and not everyone in our group was necessarily an expert in that area, although we did recognize that some of those questions about terrestrial species may be in the invasive species or the other native species sessions. And so I'll just read our highest priority questions because I think there are only 6 or so of them. So what solutions can be reached to increase upper watershed access to native migratory species? How do we evaluate success of restoration actions, and how do we monitor and evaluate effectiveness for species that are imperiled? And then within that kind of broader question, what kind of models are needed to quantify the effects of habitat restoration on salmon survival, and how does tidal restoration affect the salt marsh harvest mouse population? Another one was rewritten to be, how do we align and optimize monitoring to address specific management actions? How do floodplains improve survival for fish from both within the floodplain and through carryover effects? And then finally, what is driving species composition changes over time? As our highest priority questions.
Fantastic. I think I got most of them. Really, really awesome job. Yeah, I really liked your guys' board when I was sneaking into that session as well. So thank you so much. And to all in the native species too. Next up, we have science governance. Henry.
Thanks, Rachel. So I had the pleasure of facilitating the science governance management theme. And a big thank you to Avery from the planning division for note-taking during this session and facilitating some as well, I might add. Participants from this breakout session included folks from the Council, IEP, the San Francisco Estuary Partnership, USGS, the Wetlands Regional Monitoring Program, CNRA, and the State Water Resources Control Board. So I list those out because I think it shows that we had a really good diversity of experts and interests across the estuary in this pretty cross-cutting management theme. We regrettably did not come up with a band name, but I think that's an important action item for us, so I'll follow up accordingly. First, I think it's important to recognize that there was a lot of discussion in the group about the science governance theme being a bit different from the other management themes. Just given that a lot of the questions in our theme touched on processes and desired outcomes for the science enterprise rather than kind of topics or species-specific issues. That said, we spent most of the breakout session voting on questions in Mural and discussing the questions or groups of questions that bubbled to the top. So we don't have a done and dusted product from the session, but we were able to take our 132 original management questions and hone in on 20 of them that folks thought most related to the science governance theme. And these 20 management questions really span kind of stepwise process for iterative and effective science governance. And the management questions broadly relate to improving and coordinating monitoring, information exchange, synthesizing and integrating monitoring data, forecasting and responding to extreme events, integrating and enhancing models, enhancing and coordinating funding, integrating lessons learned and outside knowledge, and measuring governance effectiveness. And again, this isn't a done and dusted product. So in terms of next steps, I think Avery and I will follow up with the group to kind of take a closer look at the top 20 management questions that bubbled up and maybe do some merging and restructuring. And then also take a second look at the questions that didn't rise to the top to make sure that we're not eliminating anything important. Also, the group was had a lot of great ideas about taking a lot of the information gathered from this process and using it just even beyond the science action agenda to really operationalize a lot of the issues identified in the theme. And so there were ideas for folding some of this information into a charter, or perhaps using the next iteration of the Delta Science Plan to do that, or Delta Science Strategy. So that's kind of open-ended, but just great to see those ideas and interest. I didn't capture everything, obviously, from the session, so I just lastly like to encourage any participants from the group to add anything I missed in our discussion later on. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And to all in the science governance team. All right, we have habitat management next. Are you guys ready, Annika and Sam?
Yep, I'm here.
Awesome. Okay, great.
Thank you, Rachel. So just as everybody else so far, we had a great discussion. A big thank you to all the participants. I was amazed by their stamina. We worked until 3 minutes before 1 o'clock. Thank you, Sam, for taking notes and managing our mural. I thought that worked really well. We had 151 questions, and of those we eliminated 17. But we only got through 3 of the 6 sub-themes, so we didn't make it all the way through. In the beginning, there was a lot of questions on how the process actually works and how do we decide which questions to keep, how to juggle competing interests. Some questions were important for tidal marsh, others for floodplains. How do we juggle that? And we worked through some and then arrived at an approach where we essentially wrote drafts of overarching questions and then grouped the other questions underneath. And it would take follow-up work to really fine-tune those overarching questions, make sure that as much as possible from the more detailed questions underneath are incorporated. And maybe as an example, for the habitat restoration sub-theme, overarching questions were, what new information do we need to better understand lessons from habitat restoration projects in the future? Can invasive species be managed, and to what extent do they negate intended benefits of restoration? Does wetland restoration provide the expected benefits? And what are the best methods for habitat restoration? We didn't formulate it, but we were wanting to add a question on monitoring and adaptive management. Also one, and that at the same time captures the best approaches to balancing trade-offs. But there was one specific question that we thought important to keep because it wasn't really captured anywhere else and we couldn't fit it into any of the other topics, but we considered it as really important, and that is, how can conservation goals in levee maintenance and flood management practices be incorporated to provide or increase habitat? That was just for one of our sub-themes, our results, and I don't want to go into all of them. We did not discuss the ideal number of management questions, but just from how many we came up with it was our biggest sub-theme, but there are 6 questions, 1 sub-theme, so we probably would go towards the 15 max. And that's all I got.
That's great. Thank you, Annika and Sam and all in the Habitat group. All right, next up, we're almost there. Native Species 1, Eva, are you ready to go?
Yes, I just have to unmute. Sorry.
Thanks.
Yeah. Anyways, so we started with 196 questions. We eliminated the 95 that received the lowest ranking in the survey for discussion, and that left us with 101 that were then divided, that were already divided into 4 sub-themes. And as we started to look at the questions, then we started to bin them more over Mural to put them together and see which ones were similar enough to merge, and took notes on those. And I will follow up with Edmund for the notes too. And it was really nice because everybody was great in participating and giving feedback and trying to figure out how to sort all the questions and discuss where, you know, what they were more likely to give an answer to. So many questions were also high level, but species specific at the same time. Or they included everything we want to know about a species. So we discussed how those questions, how we could make them broader to include all native species instead, and then those listed species would fall under that. We also talked about how to make the questions phrased so they include aquatic and terrestrial species, because there was definitely mostly aquatic species that had reached the top in the rankings, but there were also some terrestrial species questions that were left in the lower ranked questions then. And so it was, you know, if we can make whatever questions that were picked to include both, that would solve that. So we wanted to keep the max actually 15 questions because we started with so many. And at the very end of the session, we used the voting function to have everybody pick their 15 top questions across all the sub-themes, because I had originally thought about splitting them out, you know, like giving points, because one sub-theme was so much bigger than the others. But in the end, we just voted across all the sub-themes, and everybody had 15 votes. So they are not, that voting ranking or the result is not meant to be definitive, but it's just a guide to select the top questions. So I do have some follow-up to do, and I will reach out to the group with the voting results. We went through them, but they aren't saved, that everybody can see them. So I will get that out. So we didn't really eliminate anything apart from the 95 questions to begin with. There was a lot of discussion on which ones were similar enough to be put together and so forth. And Edmund took notes of all that, and we will get all that feedback incorporated. And then I also encouraged everybody to provide any further thoughts through either the box, the document, the Word document, or you know, everybody still has access to the mural to go back and look at everything. So it was a great group to work with, and everybody was engaged. And yes, I think we ended with like 11 minutes or something to spare for 1 o'clock. So it was a long haul, but I really appreciate everybody's input and participation.
Great, thank you, Eva. And well done to the Native Species 1 group. All right, last but certainly not least, water quality. Ben, unless someone else is reporting out.
Sorry, I was on mute. Okay. Yeah, so it was me, it was Dylan Stern and Ted. The three of us made a good team. I've got to give a lot of credit where credit is due to Dylan and Ted. They did a lot of pre-workshop stuff to kind of bin, rank, organize, and create the in Mural, which was super helpful. We had 250 questions. That was a pretty tough task to kind of take on in the time that we had, obviously, but because of all the pre-workshop stuff, and in some way or another, it seems to me like we got to most of the questions in one way or another, or at least looked at them. That being said, you know, we weren't able to eliminate any, I guess, straight out, but I guess what we would say is that we're able to reduce the overall number by merging and combining and kind of reprioritizing or reorganizing some of the stuff. We actually took what was originally 8 sub-themes, and I think we actually combined some of the themes as well. We don't have an actual number that's to be determined. We'd have to kind of go back and look. We were dealing with a lot of questions, so we'll have to report back on what we were actually able to drop that initial 250 to what lower number we were actually able to drop that to. We had an awesome team as well. We had 11 folks participate that were super engaged and came from a very wide variety of agencies and entities and expertise, which is really great because we heard from everybody throughout the hours, and we worked through lunch as well. And I was pretty stringent on keeping the time pace going so that we could at least touch on most of the on most of the sub themes. We actually got through all of the sub themes and most of the questions, but we originally anticipated using that voting tool. Obviously, and we weren't really thinking of it as a super definitive thing, but more of a tool to kind of facilitate discussion. But we quickly figured out as time was flying by that we still probably weren't at that point to be able to comfortably vote. We still had a lot of work before we could even get there, but we did make a lot of progress. So I guess that takes us to some of the challenges maybe and some of the suggestions with such a big number. What we found was it was really hard to balance when looking at some of these questions and really what they're going to be used for. It's balancing writing them in a general way that maybe they can be flexible in adapting over the 5 years that this SAA is going to be used versus trying to stick with really scientific and specific questions kind of targeted at a specific location or at specific parameters. We saw the value in both, but in the time that we had, and it was really kind of hard for a lot of us, you know, even as we moved on through the hours, to really figure out, were we really trying to, you know, pinpoint some very specific questions that could lend themselves useful to creating actions that were very specific, or did we want to try to keep a little bit more general and lend to a little bit more flexibility under a general question, knowing that we had 250 really good questions that all you know, that need attention. But so that was a challenge, and some suggestions came out as far as maybe it would have been helpful to do a little bit more pre-workshop binning of questions or synthesis of some of the questions. And that goes back towards a balance, another balance of, you know, kind of being open and transparent and letting the group kind of tackle everything as is versus kind of the best use of the experts and in the group's time. We found that we still have quite a bit of follow-up kind of homework to do, but we're excited to do it. But it would have been nice to, I mean, Ted, again, going back to Ted and Dill, they did an amazing job doing a lot of pre-workshop stuff. You know, it might have been useful to spend even more time. It turns out to do some of that stuff, maybe in smaller teams. I'm not sure where we're going quite with that, but it also came up as a suggestion, and it would have been nice kind of thing to have a list of current decisions or issues that were being contemplated by decision makers in the realm of water quality, kind of on the table, so that we knew a little bit more how to focus if we were going to get kind of specific, as opposed to the general, like I talked about before, to really, what kind of questions should we kind of pose that would lend to actually, kind of help get closer to answering those bigger kind of decisions or issues that are being contemplated by the by the decision makers, and that we kind of anticipate for over the next 4 to 5 years. So yeah, that being said, the time went by really fast. I'm probably missing a few of the things that you wanted to capture here, but Dylan and Ted did a great job doing some note taking. So if I'm missing something, maybe I'll give the last couple minutes of my time to let Dylan or Ted kind of chime in on some of the highlights, maybe some of the specific things that or notes that were important that came out of this.
I guess you just did a fantastic job, Ben.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Ted. I don't really have anything extra to add. Thank you, Ben.
Okay. All right. Yeah, it was it was really really good workshop. We've got a lot of stuff left to do. So, but I'm really proud of the team, and I'm really excited to be a part of this.
Great. Thank you, Ben.
Yep.
And thank you, everybody, for reporting out. All the facilitators, this was really helpful. Sorry for my typos and everything on the screen, but we'll follow up. This is just really helpful, and it's nice to kind of hear from all the groups. Right now, I'm just going to swap my screen again and bring up the PowerPoint, so bear with me. Can folks see this?
Yes.
Yep. Yes.
Great. So right now, really we have until we have 30 minutes or so slated for this. So at about 2:15, we'll want to wrap up. But, this is really the time to just have a discussion and hear from other participants. It was great to hear some of the feedback of, suggestions, key challenges, a lot of the progress that was made by all the different breakout sessions. Fantastic job. But we'd also just love to hear in general if there are other comments from your breakout sessions that weren't just summarized from the report out. Also the post-workshop list, our next step with all this, we're planning to send something out that's much, much, much shorter as our next step for getting additional feedback. But based on the kind of comments here, if there are other thoughts on how we should be, if individual breakout sessions would like to have some sort of follow-up individually before we go about that process, or just other thoughts that you have on maybe you don't want us to reach out to you until we have a much shorter list down the road. But yeah, thoughts if you have anything on the post-workshop materials, and just general comments and questions overall. And please, to ask a question or a comment, please just either enter the easiest approach is just to enter your name into the chat, and Lita's going to help me in listing off who is in order to speak. And I will ask, so go ahead, start putting your questions in the chat. I will also just encourage, facilitators, note takers, and Louise to chime in on the questions as well, depending on what we get. Lita, do we have any questions or folks that want to ask a question yet?
Nicholas, did you want to say your comment, or were you just texting that in for everybody?
Oh no, I think just as text is fine, and Ben kind of covered that already, I think.
All right, thanks. Gina?
I used the chat because my audio has been cutting in and out. Do I sound okay now?
You sound okay now. I'll cover you if it starts to go bad.
Great. Yeah, we had some wordsmithing and dropping of questions that were already there and adding new questions of our own and combining questions. And at one point it occurred to me, folks might wonder why we included some and not others, or what did we mean by this? And we tried to keep the questions kind of short. so they didn't get too wordy. So I was just wondering if there was an opportunity in the final product somewhere to kind of annotate around each question. Over.
Yeah, thanks, Gina. So I think I'm thinking of, with the list, I think our vision originally was to just have the questions as the list, but maybe I should take a step back and just let everybody know that we do plan to make like the full list, the whole master list of questions and how they've evolved through this process, including feedback from this working session available. So that, the feedback from here will be captured in that way. But yeah, I'm curious to hear folks' thoughts on, like, are you saying kind of for your top list of questions, you want to have a little context available? Or are you more wanting to document the rationale for why some questions were removed?
More the former than the latter, but I feel like if people submitted these questions, they might want to know why they weren't included. Maybe not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's a fair point. Well, we'll certainly be capturing this feedback. It's just a matter of if it's like actually as part of the final list, but we'll definitely be capturing the reasoning for why certain questions were not, didn't get moved forward through this process.
Corey, did you have an answer or a question?
I just had a couple of quick comments related to the Delta's Place group discussion that I think are maybe more meta level to the broad science action agenda that I wanted to share, which were that people mentioned that they kind of felt like in the past this had been under prioritized and under investigated, and that we don't have like a baseline or foundation for a lot of this, and so emphasized the need for that. But also people talked a little bit about the fact that human dimension work needs to be integrated into the other sections as well. And so I don't know what that might look like necessarily in the science action agenda, but it may be worth having human dimensions within not its own kind of siloed research direction, but as a part of many of the other tasks that are advocated for in the final report.
Thanks, Corey. That's really helpful feedback. And, I will say, based on having spent a lot of time with all of these questions, we did organize questions that, could be, are related to the human dimension and could be addressed by more of like a social science research project, were included in the other themes. So like, I know, for example, the invasive species group did discuss quite a bit of that related to human interactions and invasive species, for example. So I would say that they're kind of scattered throughout the different themes because we wanted to be cognizant of that as well, of not just lumping anything that's related to the human dimension into the Delta's Evolving Place theme. And then also just, I appreciate you elevating this too. We're hoping that with the, the next step of having a science actions workshop, that we really do do the appropriate outreach to ensure that there are social scientists or, people with those expertise in the room to help us craft the science actions to be enticing to somebody to address from either the natural or social science disciplines. So thank you.
Thanks, Rachel.
I can't see the chat, but if there are there other questions or comments?
Yeah, Sakura is next.
Hi there. My question is just, is there going to be an effort to track progress on the management priorities that were first included in the first science action agenda, but now the second iteration, just because as this process continues to develop over the years, it's going to be very critical to know if the previous priorities were met and addressed and where those stand now. So can you speak at all to any kind of tracking?
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess tracking in the sense of like real time, like having status updates more regularly online. No, but that's definitely that's something that we've heard. I think feedback also in the survey that we had earlier about more real-time tracking in a way. So that's just a side note. But the next step in our process overall for the science action agenda, following this, following this management question component, is preparing for the science actions next step, where we are going to incorporate all of today's feedback when we consider that workshop in the future. But in order to be prepared for the science actions workshop, a key next step is assessing the progress made on the current science actions in the current science action agenda. So because this management question component is a new element in the science action agenda, we didn't do that kind of process, but that is certainly going to be a next step when we actually think about the science actions as well, of considering and tracking the progress that's been made on current ones. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for bringing that up.
Anthony, did you have a answer or question?
Maybe it's more of a logistical thing, and maybe it's just the nature of our group. We had so many questions that we felt were very similar, and we combined them so that the time management was a little challenged. In fact, that some of us were actually doing some work on the side, and I was very thankful for them to do that, because we were combining questions, but then we couldn't all 100% get engaged with the dialogue and the conversation. So just something to think about, and whether if any other groups had that challenge as well, is having to participate, but then also trying to kind of do a little work here on the side, and not being able to be fully engaged. So I don't know if that's a statement or a question, but just throwing it out.
No, that's really helpful feedback, like meaning trying to have a discussion around questions, but also reading and maybe commenting on them at the same time.
Yes.
Awesome. Yeah, if other groups kind of had that challenge or figured out any sort of solutions around that, feel free to chime in. And that can be facilitators or participants.
I don't see anyone responding at the moment, so for now, why don't we move to Tamara, and if anyone wants to chime in on Anthony's topic, feel free to add your name to the chat.
Great, thank you, Lita.
Well, I'll read the question because I'm not sure if Tamara's on. She said they had to step out. Maybe this was addressed. So the question is, how do these SAA efforts relate to the Science Needs Assessment Workshop that is next week?
It's a very great question, and I'm not going to answer in too much detail because in about 15 minutes, Amanda Bohl is going to address just that. But these efforts are, we've been in quite a bit of coordination with them, but really the science action agenda is pretty focused on what management questions we need to be addressing now, or considering in the next 4 to 5 years. And so whereas the science needs assessment is thinking about, what science actions do we need to know, what need to address, and what governance changes we need to make in order to respond to kind of rapid environmental change and just climate change impacts over the longer term. But I'm mostly just going to defer to Amanda chiming in about that in about 15 minutes.
All right, there's no more questions at the moment.
Okay, thanks. Feel free if others have thoughts.
Sorry, it looks like Josh has his hand raised.
Oh yeah, I just saw that. Josh, please speak.
Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, I'm gonna turn off my camera because my bandwidth's a little light right now. But Is there any discussion about doing some kind of evaluation quantitatively or looking at even something maybe based on expert opinion with feasibility about how these questions may improve the management outcomes that we would like to achieve?
Sorry, I muted myself. Any discussion of like an evaluation of how these questions may improve our management efforts going forward? Are you talking about this effort in and of itself of gathering management questions? Or are you specifically talking about us having some sort of way of tracking progress individually on these types of questions moving forward?
I was thinking about it another way, like, you know, trying to use decision support models to understand the value of improving our understanding and getting the management outcomes we want. And so using something like, you know, the Integrated Modeling Steering Committee to devise models that quantify, you know, Delta plan performance measure outcomes and how much we benefit and it can achieve those performance measures by improving our understanding by answering these questions. That's what I was sort of asking about.
So, Josh, this has been, or would you, I guess, and let me get, I'm trying to wrap my brain around the question. Are you suggesting to kind of create a model that maybe assumes assumes kind of the best outcome of filling gaps and trying to figure out as a output of a model, like how much benefit that provides with these specific, if these specific questions were to be answered?
Yeah,
that's definitely something we can talk about. I don't think that we've specifically as a group here in the science program have talked specifically about kind of creating a, you know, something to quantify that, but that would be very interesting.
Hey, Josh, this is Louise. I just want to appreciate the question. One of the things that this whole discussion and your question in particular is making me think about is how much does some of this discussion, particularly about adding capacity for us to be able to address how well we've answered a management question or gotten to a desired place regarding management outcomes, is that really a Delta Science plan question where we need to think about what infrastructure do we have in order to align our science with our management? Or is it a science action agenda item where we are trying to identify the science that we need in order to move forward? Do you understand, or do you see that distinction that I'm trying to make? And I'm thinking that this is an area for more discussion, and Henry's report out on the science governance section, I think, brought this forward a little bit already. But I think that it's a good question. I just think that we need to be careful and targeted in how we develop content for both documents, because they do have different purposes.
Yeah, that's a really good perspective. And I think it's more of the former than the latter. And it's probably more something for the Delta Science Plan to think about how to implement that, because it is really integrated. But, you know, we have many, many lists of many, many questions, and all of them are very, well, maybe all of them aren't very important. We have no way of really determining that other than popular opinion in some ways. And so maybe that is something to tackle in the broader science enterprise, and not necessarily a science action agenda objective. So thanks, Louise.
Thank you.
Yeah, really great question. Thank you. Lita, are there others in the chat?
No, I don't see any other questions.
All right. Well, if folks have other thoughts or questions, feel free, keep adding them in the chat, and I will we'll keep checking that. But so far, thank you so much for all the feedback. I'm just going to switch slides just to quickly run through. Sorry. I'm a little slow on my end. Okay, so I just kind of following up on this discussion, just reminding folks that our next steps for, specifically the management questions kind of workshop, that some of the groups, it sounds like, want to do a little bit more back and forth potentially, but either way, overall, what we're going to do, science program staff, primarily myself and the collaborative science and peer review unit, will be to incorporating all the feedback. The feedback that was provided earlier before the workshop through all of the voting and the written comments, as well as all the discussion during the workshop, in order to come back with a much shorter list. And also, hearing the points and comments from folks before, really also making sure that we, I think a similar timeline can also make the full list of questions available, showing kind of the evolution of the questions and which ones were or were not, that didn't make it through the screening, that didn't make it, that got low ratings from the pre-workshop voting, and then also didn't get elevated to the top list here at the workshop and moving forward. So we'll be able to make that full list available. And then, even more next steps for the broader science action agenda effort. The next step is going to be, once we have this top list of Delta management questions, we have some selection criteria that we will be using. It was also, circulated for public review earlier this summer. The selection criteria will help us to select the questions that we want to, or that will be taken into the science action agenda. And then from there, we'll be kind of binning, if you will, the management questions around broader management needs. And that will be sometime in later this year, late fall. And then, the next steps, once we have those management needs and the organized management questions, will be thinking through the science actions, getting down to that point and being informed by the progress that's been made on current science actions and what are the current management needs identified through this whole process. And so look out for that workshop probably in sometime in the spring, maybe mid to late spring 2021. And I want to just quickly check, Lita, are there any other questions before we move on to Amanda's presentation or announcement? Any questions in the chat?
Rachel, this is Louise. I don't see any additional questions in the chat. Sorry, Lita, I see you there. I wasn't sure if
no, I
just
just walked away for a sec. Sorry.
No, that's totally fine. So Rachel, Henry, the whole collaborative science peer review unit, thank you so much. What an excellent day. And I'm looking forward to Amanda's presentation as well.
Thanks, Louise. And yeah, sorry, Lita, I can't see the folks on the room. Okay, so Amanda, are you able to present? I can swap to your slide.
Yes, I'm ready to go. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you see your slide?
I do. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Rachel, and good afternoon, everyone. And thank you all very much for your time here today. I just want to take a few minutes to talk about next week's Science Needs Assessment Workshop, kind of, what it is, how it connects to today and the overall science action agenda, and in particular management questions. So just a little bit of background, in February 2019, the Delta Independent Science Board sent a letter to the Delta Plan Interagency Implementation Committee, also known as DPIC, requesting the development of a strategic and forward-looking science needs assessment, stressing that in the face of rapid environmental change, that we're long past the point of thinking just 2, 5, 10 years ahead, and that we must begin to think strategically about our long-term science needs, both the science itself and the Delta Science Enterprises structure for managing science and the connections between science and policy. So this request was made to build on the work of the Delta Science Funding Initiative white paper, as well as the 2019 Delta Science Plan. And in response, DPIC included the science needs assessment as one of 3 priority actions to come out of what became an expanded Delta Science Funding and Governance Initiative. So co-hosted by DPIC and the Delta Independent Science Board, the Science Needs Assessment Workshop was originally planned for April 27th and 28th. But as with many, many things these last 6 months, this was rescheduled to a virtual workshop next week, October 5th and 6th. But to kind of keep the momentum going during the last 6 months or so, we added 4 pre-workshop discussions to begin to address the 4 main questions posed for the workshop and for consideration. So also we developed in advance or drafted an advanced briefing paper that set the stage for this effort, providing background and exploring just a bit these questions that the pre-workshop panels have been discussing and that the breakout groups will continue to discuss during next week's workshop. So the results from this effort, from the Science Needs Assessment, will feed into the Science Action Agenda, much like the work that you all did here today is going to feed into the Science Needs Assessment. While the Science Action Agenda primarily focuses on determining kind of what science managers need right now, the Science Needs Assessment, focuses kind of more on the science we need to start immediately or make plans to do to meet the challenges we're facing or that we think we're going to be facing in the future in face of rapidly changing climate. And so as you all probably noticed while reviewing and discussing the management questions today, many of the management questions relate to the future. And so the Science Action Agenda and especially the identification of these management questions and the Science Needs Assessment are really kind of integrally intertwined. And the work that all of you just completed will be used to inform the Science Needs Assessment. In a way, when I kind of think about this in my head, kind of what comes into mind is kind of a picture with both of these efforts as well as the science plan and other efforts and just kind of a bunch of circular lines. And I think, considering all this is kind of like this larger science, Delta science strategy. And so we're just trying to kind of inject a bit more, forward-looking science as the Delta ISB kind of charged us with to kind of start thinking a bit more strategically about how we all move forward in these changing times. So if you did not register for the Science Needs Assessment workshop, but your interest is piqued, please reach out to me. There is still time to register and we would love to have you. And so with that, if there's time for questions, I'm happy to take any, but I really want to thank you all again for engaging and agreeing to participate today. And I know many of you are signed up for next week, so thank you for that time in advance as well. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Amanda. I did want to see if there are any additional questions about the Science Needs Assessment, Science Action Agenda connection.
I don't see any questions in the queue.
All right, no problem. Well, then I just want to say thank you all so much. I'm going to pass it off to Henry for some closing remarks, but we're wrapping up a little bit early for those who want to join the IEP session or just maybe have a little time to decompress after this. Truly an awesome and wonderful lift, and we really appreciate it, and I hope you guys got a lot out of the workshop. So, Henry, I'm going to swap the slide.
Thanks, Rachel. I'm going to try to get through this quickly before our attendees number starts dropping. I just want to take this opportunity to say thank you. First, we want to thank Delta Science Program alums, including Dr. John Calloway, Tracy Grimes, and Yumiko Henneberry, who formally led the charge for the 2017 Science Action Agenda update, and also helped us to develop the 2022 to 2026 update process. Also, as Rachel already said, huge shout out to the science program and planning staff who facilitated and documented today's breakout sessions, as well as our Deputy Executive Officer for Science, Louise Conrad. And also a big thank you to Eric, Lita, and Brandon for keeping everything running so smoothly behind the scenes, so thank you. We also want to thank members of our advisory committee who helped us tackle some of the processes and process challenges associated with this Science Action Agenda update. We also want to thank all of you who joined today's workshop for making time, for thinking critically, for your really thoughtful comments, and helping us to wrangle this huge number of management questions and making this process more accurate and more meaningful. And last but not least, I want to acknowledge the tremendous support provided by the members of the Collaborative Science and Peer Review Unit in the Delta Science Program. So Dylan Stern, Eva Bush, Byron Riggins, Ted Flynn, and especially Rachel Klopfenstein, who has been so aptly captaining this ship for the last few months. So at this point, and this might be kind of crazy, but I'd just like to encourage you to unmute yourself and just give each other a round of applause. Yeah, all right. Thank you.
Truly.
And that's
Thanks
it
all.
for me. Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you all so much.
Thanks, Rachel.
For the rest of your Tuesday. We'll be in touch.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Henry. Thanks, Rachel.